Okay, good morning. My name is Krystal Price. I'm a nutritional sciences student here at the University of Arizona, and I'm actually researching out of the Summer Research Institute here at the university. And today I'll be presenting on the methodology to my summer project, which is effects of physical activity and menarcheal status in female adolescent bones. Okay, so basically what I did this summer was I took the data from the University of Arizona's jump-in study, which is basically a study that implemented a jumping program in the PE classes of middle school and elementary school age girls to see what it would do to their bone density. Because as I presented before, impact is really good for bones. I want to see if it worked in younger girls as well. So basically what I did was I analyzed the data of 235 healthy girls. They're all pre-menarcheal at baseline at the start of this study, so they hadn't had their first menstrual period yet. They're 8 to 12 years old, and yeah. Okay, so basically how we determined what their menarcheal status was, we gave out health questionnaires, which basically asked them, have you had your first menstrual period yet? And we did this at baseline, 1 year, and 2 year. And that's how we could track where they are at in their pubertal status thing. So basically in my study, I wanted to see whether exercise affected premenarcheal girls equally as well as it affects transmenarcheal girls. So I had two groups. In my first group, there was premenarcheal girls who hadn't had their period yet. And this consisted of 132 girls. And these were girls that during the 2-year study never got their period. So they remained premenarcheal the whole time. And then my other group was the transmenarcheal group, who started out premenarcheal, but then within the 2-year study, they had reached their menses. And that was 103-year-olds. Okay, so unfortunately, my mentors don't feel that the data they got from the jumping is conclusive enough to come with any conclusions, because they don't think the girls were actually doing what they're supposed to be doing in the jumping class. So instead I evaluated their physical activity through their PIPAC scores. So basically PIPAC is the past year physical activity questionnaire, and it basically takes into account all the sports that they do and the leisurely physical activity that they've done the past year, and gives it a score. So they evaluate on weight-bearing load, typical duration, and then the frequency that they did it. So yeah, the girls with the highest PIPAC scores were the girls that are most physically active, and the girls with the lowest were the ones that really did do anything. Okay, so they also took the height and weight of all the girls. Height was to the nearest millimeter, and was at full inhalation. So actually when you inhale fully, you're the tallest, so that's really important. They use a stodometer, which is basically just like a wall measurement, and they use a board to find exactly where your head's, how tall you are. And then they did weight was to the nearest 1/10 of a kilogram. They use a Seika electronic scale, which is this. Okay. So they also did bone lengths, which is really important for tracking how these girls' bones are developing over the 2 years. So they did it on the non-dominant leg, which is if you're playing soccer or something, the leg that you don't kick with, okay, because the other one's a little bit biased because that's what you do the most activity with. They also did this to the nearest millimeter. They used just basic seamstress tape for the measurements. So they measured the femur and the tibia. The femur is this bone right here. And they measure it from this crease, so where your leg, bends right there, and then to the top of the patella or your knee. And then for the tibia, this bone right here, they measured from this plane. So if you feel your knees, there's actually a little nook right here. And that's where your tibia starts, and they measure it all the way to the inner ankle. There's another plane where your tibia ends. Okay, so they took bone parameters to further track how their bones are doing as their physical activity change and as they're supposedly jumping more. For the femur, they did the 4% site and the 20% site, and how they judge site locations is its percentage site away from the epiphyseal plate. So this is an epiphyseal plate, and this is also one. That's your growth plate, you know, before it seals off when you're mature. So the 4% site, they did it from the distal plate. So 4% site is probably about like right here on this bone. And this is a good measure of your trabecular bone, because that's all like the squishy, spongy bone that's in the ends. And then the 20% site is about right here, around this area. And that's a good measure of your cortical bone strength. So on the tibia, which is this one, so this is your femur, and that's where it attaches to the hip and then to the knee. And this is tibia, where it attaches to the knee and then to the ankle. So for the 4% site, they did it from the proximal epiphyseal line, and that's about right there. So there's a lot of cortical bone in here, which is really nice. And then 66%, which is about right there, so it's the cortical bone. Okay, so from these bone measurements, they're able to come up with the strength indices of the girl's bones. So basically, there's BSI and there's SSI, which is what we focus on in the study. So BSI measures how well your bone holds up against compressional forces. So as you can see right here, it's when force is pushing down on your bone. As you can see, this guy is intensely lifting weights. And so all this weight is compressing his arms and his spine and his hips and especially his knees. So all that force is basically squishing your bone down, and all that spongy trabecular bone is condensing it. So yeah, it's a measure of your trabecular bone strength and your trabecular bone density, because if this guy had osteoporosis, he would be on the floor. Okay. They also tested like your strength strain index, which is basically how well your bones hold up to like torsional forces. So it's like twisting, as you can see right here. It's kind of like that. So like if someone twists your arm really hard, you know, whether you're gonna have a fracture or not, that's the strength strain index. And that tests cortical bone strength because it really strains your outer hard bone of your arms and legs. Okay, and so how they did all this was they did it through peripheral quantitative computed tomography, which basically is this machine with a hole in it, and as myself said, you just stick your limb through. So this lady's getting her femur done. So, and it basically just sends x-rays through that site on your bone, and it tells you based on how fast the x-rays go through what your bone density is. Okay, we also did DEXA scans. This dual energy x-ray absorptiometry. This is to determine percent body fat. So it's kind of the same thing as the PQCT. It's just an entire body. It also can tell you bone density, but the lab that I'm in is kind of testing out PQCT to see if it's the same accuracy. But it just goes along your entire body and sends x-rays, and depending on how fast they go through your body, they can determine what percent fat you are, what percent muscle you are, what percent bone you are, and stuff like that. Okay, so the really fun stuff, the statistical analysis. For this project, I used the statistical package for the social sciences. Apparently this is like the lesser scary of the statistical packages. So I ran descriptive analysis, which basically told me, you know, what the average age of my population was, you know, their average BMI, their weight, just like descriptive stuff about my population. I also ran t-tests on the premenarcheal girls and the transmenarcheal girls to make sure that they were different enough to even write a paper about. Lucky for me, they were. They had much different results. And also multivariate regression analysis, which basically takes all of my independent variables, such as, you know, menarcheal status, physical activity and stuff like that, and relates it and tests how significant it is to different bone parameters, which are my dependent variables. Hey, these are the wonderful people that helped me get through the summer. Without them, I would not be here for sure, and I wouldn't know anything. And that concludes my presentation. Is there any questions?
So do you have results?
I don't. But if you want them, you should go to my presentation on August 5th.
I think I can show up.
Huh? Okay, good, yeah.
Not you.
Really good. You had a good pace and your good body language.